Dan Rather here, and we're in Bogota, Colombia, where we've been for a while, working on an investigative report, what we think is a very good story, basically about the rehabilitation of people who were fighting the wars here in Colombia, wars that lasted more than half a century. Very complicated war situation. On the one hand, the FARC, F-A-R-C, a revolutionary guerrilla movement of the left, also involved the paramilitaries, who represented the right, pretty far right, defenders of large landowners and other interests in the country. And of course, the government's own military was involved, and the drug cartels. So a deadly and volatile mix in the wars over all those years. We've been here working on a story, which we'll have on the air in the future, about those who fought those wars being rehabilitated back into society. So, working on this story, we thought what we had was a scoop, but unfortunately the scoop flew the coop. Now, the lead reporter and producer on this story, Andrew Glazer, happy to say for Dan Rather Reports, an Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter. So Andrew, with that as background, let's talk about this Hector 44 and how our scoop flew the coop.
Well, you never know what you're going to get and what you're not going to get. And when we came here to Colombia, we didn't expect to speak to Hector 44 because he hadn't defected yet. And while we were here, we got wind that this big fish had defected, had left FARC and laid down his arms, turned himself into the government, and that we would have an opportunity to speak to him about 2 or 3 days after this happened. So we were ready to do that, and then he flew the coop.
Well, we have talked to others who have defected, and that's part of the spine of our story, of whether they be former warriors of the radical left or radical right, or for that matter, those who've been involved in the drug trade once they defect. And Colombia has this, what looks to be a fairly effective, well, I'd say very effective so far, rehabilitation process. So we've talked to others. But this would have been the highest ranking and most recent defector.
Yeah, and they've made a big show of that. I think there's, in the propaganda wars, when you show that a high-ranking member of FARC turned himself in, it shows, or they're trying to show that FARC is against the wall, and that when its high-ranking leaders are turning themselves in, that it's weakening.
Well, Andrew, we know as reporters to beware of certitude, but there's every indication that the FARC has certainly been weakened, and for that matter, the paramilitaries on the extreme right side of the political spectrum have virtually disappeared. It's been a long struggle, keeping in mind this was a 50-year war, which is not yet completely over, but over the last 10 to 12 years, review briefly what happened.
The Colombian government created a program where they allowed combatants to turn themselves in and lay down their arms, and in doing so they had an opportunity to start a new life. And they've had some success in getting, they claim, some 50,000 members of both right-wing and left-wing militias to turn themselves in, and they say that that's had a big effect in weakening both sides. The numbers are disputed by some. There have been cases of groups that were ostensibly guerrilla groups that were actually not guerrilla groups that had turned themselves in to either get benefits, government benefits for turning themselves in, or there were also allegations that the government at times was inflating the numbers of people who were turning themselves in so they would win, again, the propaganda war.
Right.
But this case of Hector 44, I don't believe anyone is disputing that it was a big coup for the government to have him turn himself in.
A big coup, and indicative that at least part of the government story. Now listen, we've lopped off the most important heads of the FARC. We got the paramilitaries to by and large disband. That there is, if not a complete truth in that, quite a bit of truth in it.
Yes, I think it's a big deal that this guy is now in government custody. And he's also a big target right now for FARC because I think they figure he is going to be spilling the beans on a lot of stuff right now. And he knows a lot. He's been in it for a while, and he was high-ranking enough to know operations and intelligence. And that's one of the reasons why I'm guessing he changed his mind about speaking to us.
Well, that's the way it goes in journalism, particularly when you do investigative journalism, and I would say most particularly when you do investigative journalism overseas. Frequently what you think is going to happen doesn't happen, and often what you don't think will happen does happen. So Dan Rather with Andrew Glazer at an undisclosed location in Bogota, Colombia.